Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about bad words, curse words, profanity. If you ever wonder the how and the why and the when all this came to be, and we're going to dig into that just a little bit today, so let's get started. When you were young and first learning to talk, you began to encounter words which you were quickly told were bad and instructed not to use them. This forbidden list was pretty broad at first. As you got older, you learned that context was important, and some randomly excluded words were actually acceptable if you understood the subtleties of when and how to use them. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on an ass, and you can say that all you want, even in church. But if you want to use that very same word to refer to your behind or as an insult to someone, that's considered vulgar. Similarly, the colloquial use of animal or human nicknames to describe genitalia changes the acceptable use of those words entirely. Eventually, you just end up with a short list of about 7 words, which comedian George Carlin presented in an entire routine to explain how they were not allowed on TV or radio. Most people just accept that these words are socially inappropriate and thus exclude them from their regular vocabulary. For much of my adult life, I obeyed this implied etiquette of not using profanity in regular conversation. But as a driver, I found that release of such language in the privacy of my car to describe how I feel about the idiot drivers on the road is therapeutic. This freedom to express myself has expanded into my time working on projects, and it's come in handy to describe my frustration when something doesn't go according to plan. My mother didn't curse much, but when she let one fly, she always followed up with the phrase, "Excuse my French." This appeared to credit the French as the origin of our friend's language, but later I found out that there is no truth to this. In fact, the French have such lame curse words, they have to come to English to borrow ours if they want a real impactful verbal outburst. As I allowed the use of all these words to creep back into my speech, I began to realize there's nothing inherently wrong with the syllabic content of these words. Every curse word on that most vile list has multiple cousins that sound similar but carry no negative connotation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much humans love to create social constructs to enforce boundaries in an effort to delineate right from wrong. With the case of what is traditionally recognized as profane words, we have arbitrarily applied a label to create a wrong side to language when none is needed. Why do we need to chastise the use of certain verbal sounds if they aid in our ability to communicate more effectively? The F-bomb has nearly a dozen rhyming words, which are perfectly fine for anyone to say at any age in any context. You can talk about a truck, a duck, a buck, or luck, and you can suck on a lollipop, cluck like a chicken, or duck under a fence all you want. The crux of the matter is that you can use these words or variations of them with similar grace. You can hit a ball, have a fit, talk about it, the candle is lit, you can sit, spit out the pit, go get a drink, or say any number of things that sound like another one of our socially unacceptable words. Since so many words carry similar pronunciation, sounds themselves must not be the problem. Must be in the meaning of the word. Each of them do represent either a private part of the body or an action which is meant to take place in private. But a number of comics have developed entire routines about how we use our curse words in ways that completely defy their original meaning. Since we have so few of these really bad words, maybe it's just more convenient to augment their use exponentially than attempt to come up with new ones. For some reason, some person at some point in the past put a label on these very useful words to keep them from being used as a mainstay of everyday conversation. What's worse, is that the masses of people who followed bought into it, and our society became stratified into those who curse and those who don't. No matter what side of that fence you sit, if you're not used to saying these words aloud, getting your mouth to project one is like trying to speak a foreign language or your facial muscles simply cannot form into sound. There's a natural resistance you cannot overcome. On the other hand, if you're accustomed to using curse words, they fall off your lips as easily as drool on your pillow. Civilization does require some rules of conduct to maintain peaceful interaction between people. Narrowing topics of discussion might be a good reason for applying discretion based on the familiarity of the parties. But why is identifying perfectly good words as evil a necessary aspect of social decorum, especially when the words themselves are completely benign? Isn't a large vocabulary a sign of education and intelligence? Whatever the roots of your compliance with this communication taboo, try being a bit rebellious and see if the world comes to an end. Yes, you will shock some people, and in official situations, you might not want to risk offending someone who is in a position to enforce punishment. But like salt and pepper, relax and see if your use of these very clearly understood words do what they're supposed to do, help you communicate more precisely. Next time someone cuts you off in traffic, you hit your thumb with a hammer, or you drop your phone in the toilet, if you don't utter one of these words, I bet you say them in your head. I know, because you've thought about every one of these words while I've been talking, even though I never voiced a single one. That makes you a closet cursor. Are you really willing to give up your First Amendment rights of free speech, all because someone else decided that you didn't need to use our entire language to communicate? Don't come crying to me if you think nobody understands you. You're the one who chose to speak with a limited vocabulary. Have a blessed day. I appreciate you.